Again, it's March 4th, 2025, and I'm opening the subcommittee work session on House Bill 432. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We won't be taking any testimony today. We'll just be talking within ourselves, which you're more than welcome to listen to. And then we'll eventually, at the end of the discussion, we'll be doing a recommendation to the full House Municipal and County Government Committee. We can get some from you because you're a member of the local planning board. Get your thoughts.
Okay. So I have a few concerns about recovery houses. The first being that the house can go into operation before it's certified. That's number one. Number two is parking. And my assumption is that because people who are resident in recovery houses are holding down jobs, they need a means of getting to and from their jobs and other activities within the community. And my final concern is with septic systems where the recovery house is not on a town sewer system. And I guess in order of importance, it's number three, the septic system, and how towns are going to be able to handle that. I did a little bit of research, and there is statute, and I'd be happy to hand this out. There is statute that addresses septic systems when a change of use occurs, which gets us back to the original language of the bill, which says that the sober house or the recovery house has to be treated like any other house as far as zoning goes. The point is that I think this is a state law. Well, it is a state law, and it's more of a health than a zoning issue. So I would hope that the state law would kick in at some point. And my hope would be that when a house applies for certification, or actually applies to a town, they would have to certify the design capacity of the septic system. And if the intended occupancy exceeds the design capacity, which is usually 2 people per bedroom, and there are state definitions of bedrooms, room with a closet, then the state RSA would kick in, which would require design of a suitably sized septic system, I believe, before a certificate of occupancy could be obtained. And there's actually similar language or similar requirement in last year's HB 1291, which was a bill having to do with ADUs. And if someone was going to build an ADU, then you would have to have a septic system design, not install, but a design for the additional language. And I have that statute as well. Not statute, it's bill. And I believe the language for that is on page. Thank you. So I think that's something that I think I would like to see in, because it's, you know, it's a health and safety matter, and basically it protects the community.
Just to speak to the parking matter, which I have shared as a concern throughout this, but I think that's also something that's already being enforced through ordinances and regulations that we have in our towns, where you can't park in the road during this time of the year, and rules that we have like that around parking, where it's already an issue that they're going to have to figure out a way to work with. And I don't feel that it's something the government should be, and the municipalities should be dictating. When if there was a large family that had kids around the same age that would all have vehicles, we wouldn't do that in the same way.
I would agree with you, Representative Germana. Towns, you know, your analogy to families with teenage drivers, yeah, you've got to deal with it. But I'm wondering if it might be in everybody's best interest to have something about parking in the legislation, or perhaps in the certification by the certifying organization, which just kind of says to the operator, don't, you know, you've got a checkbox here, make sure it's checked.
Yeah, similarly in Rochester, we have these old, big Victorian houses that got converted to 2-bedroom, 2 and 3 unit apartments. The parking is designed for 2 cars. So we already got a problem in Rochester with no excess parking for multi-units in an old Victorian house. This would put it on a whole new level, because you're talking maybe it might be 6 or 7 cars in one building. Where are they going to park? I mean, you do have small streets in the little neighborhoods, and they're supposed to have off-street parking in the winter. That's part of our ordinances. So they're parking up on their lawn and whatnot. But you're talking 6, 7, 8 cars. That's a whole new level. They don't have room to park.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that, and I think that any owner of these facilities is going to understand that too and see that as a problem. I would just hate to see that get in the way of us being able to help solve the issue of both homelessness and then sobriety in the state over a matter such as parking, when it's an issue that's going to have to be dealt with anyways.
Representative Dolan?
Thank you. I had several concerns that I wanted to bring up. And a lot of it was based on the testimony that we received in our first subcommittee session. In general, I think these are the more recovery house beds are needed. We need to help provide those services for those people who I would like to include them as in the pejorative. They're the some of the most needy among us, and really need our help. But there's a big but. When we're caring for the needy or for those most vulnerable, I think we need to be especially careful that we provide them with the kind of safety and help that they're really going to need. One of the biggest problems I have with this bill is there's too many carve-outs in it. That when we're looking to help these needy folks, we exempt many of the safety guardrails that we put up in our communities, and these are the people that need those safety guardrails. When they go to bed at night, and they're perhaps a little compromised when they go to bed, whether they're falling off the wagon or getting involved in narcotics a subsequent time. The thing they don't need is when they wake up at 2 a.m. and they need to exit the building for whatever reason, some type of an emergency, a fire, for example. If there's no lighted exit signs to help them navigate their way out of the building, which this type of legislation would exempt that and say, oh, it's not important to provide those safety guardrails for these people. Smoke alarms, sprinkler systems. These are all things that when you have vulnerable people like this, those are the guardrails that we as legislators can help put in place. Yes, in some cases it's going to make the expense of maintaining that property higher, but what is the price of a life or several lives that may be lost because of that? Do we want to be the ones that call Mrs. Smith up and say, we lost your son in a fire and we didn't take the time to put any smoke deterrent in the building, even though we knew they were compromised or needy folks? We had some testimony about Americans with Disability Act application in our first meeting. We take very special care to provide that type of help for people that are not involved in a recovery house, that just want to have public access to a public building so that they can go to the town hall or they can go to the city hall or whatever. And we bend over backwards to make sure those doors are open, that there's enough toilets, and that there are lighted exit signs for their safety. But when we go into a community house that's a recovery house, we give carve-outs that say you don't have to do that anymore. I just think that would be irresponsible on our part to allow people to navigate through these properties without those protections. I think we're sacrificing safety at the wrong time and the wrong point in their lives. And this is going to be a lot of folks. We heard testimony that this category of people represents about 1,300 beds in the state right now, and that this change would help us achieve the need that we have of about 15,000 beds in this house. Do we really want to go back to our local communities and say, hey, we've taken the 1,300 bed requirement and upped it to 15,000, and oh, by the way, there's no requirement for any site plan review or any permitting that your community has in place to be able to apply to these things, to these houses. I just think that would be totally unacceptable to the community leaders that we have to bring this story back to eventually. So that's where my head's right now on this, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Germana.
Thank you. I absolutely share safety of, especially the individuals who are vulnerable and going into these houses as one of my main concerns. But I think that if we're looking at where they would be if they weren't in these houses and where they would end up, whether it be having trouble maintaining sobriety, not in the group setting, or whether it be going to prison or even losing a life, as we said, without an exit sign. I think we would see a lot more deaths and a lot less productivity and second chances for the most vulnerable people in our society, if we made that drag this bill down. But I'd like to know what the rest of the committee would think.
Representative Frank.
Thank you. I'm recalling testimony from several people that indicated that the residents of a recovery house are quite highly functioning people. They're folks that can, because they've gone through a process already, they are back to a normal life, shall I say? I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but they just need a lot of support to stay sober. And my takeaway from the testimony was that they could live in a house by themselves or an apartment by themselves, but because of this peer support, they may choose to live in a conjugate setting with others who are in a similar situation. And I guess I draw the analogy to, do you have exit signs and emergency exits in your house or your apartment? And I know of very few people who do that. That's my 2 cents on that. I'm not trying to downplay the safety aspect, but I want to emphasize that the testimony that I heard was that the residents in a recovery house are pretty high functioning, very high functioning.
Representative Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative, I don't argue with that point. I will bring to the table today that I had a resident bring me an example. I don't have personal knowledge of it, so it's kind of hearsay at this point, but a recovery house that he's aware of had a problem that was revealed to him through a Freedom of Information Act request that in their recovery house, person died due to an overdose of drugs. And so that's an indication that some of these folks aren't all on the straight and narrow, that they are in recovery, hence the name recovery houses, but also with the potential of relapse and perhaps in danger. And so this information was, as it related to me, received again through a FOIA request, and I think it was somewhere in the Concord community in the state.
Thank you. Representative Walker.
My major issue with this bill, outside of what everybody else has said, because I share those as well, is that it exempts from all site plan review and codes. And these they want to be treated as single-family homes, but before they're a recovery house, they weren't single-family homes. They were apartments, 3 and 4 unit apartments. So the issues are different. and it's a issue in the neighborhoods, something like this might not fit the neighborhood that they're being shoehorned in. So, and I definitely don't like them being exempt from any safety codes. And that's just not practical in my view.
Representative Jamana.
Thank you. So when I look at the bill, when I look at like the single family, two family, and multifamily, I think what the intention would be is not that it turns in from a single family to an apartment, while the heads obviously does go up a little bit. They're still being held within those ordinances.
Yeah, but when you take and they find a 3 or 4 unit building, they still want to be treated like a single family, and it's the codes are different.
The language here shall be treated in every zoning ordinance as a single family, two family, or multifamily use respectively. So I think that, I'm not sure how you feel about that. I think that meets some of those concerns where if it is already an apartment building, it will still be treated as such.
Representative Frack. Go ahead, Representative. You all set?
So I did actually receive some language. It's just a rough draft, obviously, but just it would be expanding the notice that these homes would give to municipalities with written notification to the local governing body at least 30 days prior to the beginning of operations, and through the certifying body shall notify the municipality whenever the recovery residence applies for certification, becomes certified, renews certification, is denied certification, or loses certification. So that's what this language would add.
Thank you, Representative Walker.
That's another point, is they want to get into these places before certification. I think they should get into these buildings after certification.
I do agree, and that's a question that in the hearings I also asked a lot of people. I have the certification requirements in front of me. I know it was handed out last time. But you can't become certified until you have the residents in the home and they model the behaviors and responsibilities that the certification requires of these houses. So that's the holdups there. And I do agree, I would rather a certification process where they could have a certification day one, but that's just not how the certifications work with how kind of in-depth they want, where the residents are a part of it too.
Representative Dolan.
Yeah, I think it kind of, I think we're getting towards the end here, but I think that the way I look at this is that some of these folks who provide this service are doing a wonderful work in an area that's very much needed for the people that it applies to. I think that when we're trying to craft legislation, it should be to try to help the process and try to help those that have this need that I think we recognize is out there. However, I think this legislation doesn't do that. It doesn't help the process. In fact, I think it hinders the process and puts people who are at risk even more at risk by not requiring approvals and certifications and inspections and all that stuff. I think while we're trying to do good stuff, we're not achieving that by relieving the requirements to be safe and be certified. So that's where my head's at, right?
Representative Frack.
So the question or the conundrum is, we have a certifying organization, or perhaps more than one, which says that their process of certification begins once the home is actually occupied. And do we as legislators have the ability to, in essence, revamp their certification process? And I don't have the answer to that question, but it seems to me that that's a question that needs to be answered.
I think if you check your emails, there's a letter from Health and Human Services. That may address a little bit about certification, as I recall.
Houses?
Yeah, so it's currently voluntary. Uh,
The one thing I would say in regards to registry for this bill is that this does require notification to municipalities. So it would require them to give notice.
Say it again?
As far as registry with these homes under this bill, it does require notice to the municipalities, so they would have to let their intentions be known 30 days before opening with the language that I handed out.
Did you find it, Representative Frack? You find the?
John, can I
Yes,
say
go right
something?
ahead.
The 30-day notice, do you see that as a conflict with the words of the legislation that says it's not subject to permitting or approval. You see that, not necessarily a conflict, but do you see that as a conflict?
Yeah, I do see what you're saying there, but it is contingent that you can only have that treatment if you give notice to the municipality 30 days prior.
So we'd have to amend this to take that out or add this in or whatever.
Yeah, we could, but yeah, that is the intention of it.
Did everyone have a chance to review the email from Jenny O'Higgins that I sent out concerning the position on, we talks about recovery residents and the requirements for registry and a few other things. And that was,
I don't have that available on my phone.
oh, okay. Can I forward it to you? You get email on your phone or no?
Yeah, dfrac@solver.net.
Yeah, I'll let you type it in, David.
Okay.
It's easier than me.
Don't say it on the screen.
Yeah, it's easier.
I don't get all kinds of it. John, I don't know which button to hit to send it.
Okay. There you go, it's on its way. Okay, any more comments from anyone in the committee? I've got a couple of things that I want to mention. One of the things that stood out to me on the bill as we got it, it's crossed out safe and healthy. And I can't figure out why anyone would cross out safe and healthy. And I believe I answered the sponsor, and she didn't really have any answer to why that was crossed out. That's one problem I have with it, because I think it should provide a safe and healthy substance-free living environment. I don't have any problem with not having the family like, but safe and healthy is a real concern for me. Another concern is the certification. I too agree that they should be certified prior to opening. And also, I think that we shouldn't be taking away the power of the local communities. This is something that should be done locally. They should be able to decide and pass regulations that they feel necessary. It appears the city of Nashua has done something with this, and they seem to have dealt with the issue without an RSA. And I think that's great. Again, I'm very sympathetic to folks that need this avenue to pursue a healthy life. But I also think we've got to be concerned about their safety and the feelings of our constituents. And I think it's best left on the local level to maybe they can contact the city of Nashua and get a copy of their ordinance to see how they're dealing with it, and use that as a starting point. But I don't think the state should pass a law that tells them how to run their communities. And again, the main thing is safe and healthy. That's one of the primary concerns that I have. And by removing that, I don't know anyone would remove that from the bill that's in the current law, and I can't figure out why they would do that. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you. Would you be at all open to an amendment that would add in safe and healthy back into it? I know the certification process is definitely could be a concern since they don't have it day one, but I think that would be a separate avenue that we have to go down. That would even address the ones that are open now with the ordinances that we have in place.
I would just have to say, see the amendment as you've written it. I don't want to commit to it because I haven't seen it yet. But safe and healthy would address one of my issues that I have with the current bill. And the certification, I guess that would have to be done by legislation or, requiring the certification. Maybe we could work with Health and Human Services to get their ideas on how to do that. Maybe they can do it by regulation. I'm not sure. I think right now the statute makes it voluntary and not required.
Right, and I think that would be something that, yeah, whether this be passed or not, we could look into.
Of changing the certification? Making it
Yeah, because,
required.
yeah, it already is a process, yeah, just with whatever ordinances they're in.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you. Representative Dolan, you have anything?
Yeah, I think I would, again, let me say that this is needed. Recovery houses are needed in the state. But I would be much more comfortable if we added them into being ADA compliant so that they're safe and we know exactly, no matter where you look in the state, we know exactly what's going to be in those houses. They have the right number of toilets and they have the right number of fire extinguishers and all that stuff. I don't think there's any reason why we would want to exempt ADA compliance other than to make it more profitable for the owners. And that, I don't see that as my goal in examining this legislation for owner profitability. It's primarily for the safety of the occupants that are under treatment.
Thank you, Representative Frack.
Aren't a lot of these recovery houses not nonprofits?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't have reasons for why, but I believe that for one reason or another, it's easier to not be a nonprofit. I'm not sure if someone. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I thought we had heard that it was a mix.
I think it probably is a mix, but from what I heard in talking with people, it primarily isn't just nonprofit.
Okay.
Anyone have anything else? Okay, so my understanding, the primary thing that we all agree on certification as part of being certified. Is that a fair assumption? You have to be certified? You on board with that?
Day one.
Prior to applying?
For this?
Yeah. Prior to approval.
I could be.
Okay. The other concern is here, we have some concerns about health and safety of the building and the residents.
And, if we're going to talk about prior to approval, that kind of throws a wrench into the legislation because this is supposedly doesn't require an approval process according to the legislation. So that has to be eradicated from the legislation.
Representative Frack?
Are we talking approval by the certifying organization or approval by the municipality? Because I see two different approvals needed here.
I think RSA 175 B2 is the, let me just check here. I think that's the state approval for the certification.
I think that we're talking, you're right, there's a mix of approvals, but I think that the one that I would be focused on is the land use boards in the individual community. To your point, Representative, I think that if we're going to deny the community the right to adjudicate things like this in their own community, I think that's a risky road to go down. I think that the zoning board and the planning boards need to be involved in these decisions. And so it's not just a state certification in my mind. It's the land use boards that would apply and depending on how the community town government is set up.
I would agree with you 100%. I feel very confident in the ability of municipal and county government to address land use issues, but I don't feel that we have the expertise to address the certification of a social service organization, I guess you would call
I agree.
it. It's just totally out of our wheelhouse.
Representative Jamana?
Thank you. I think with a lot of what we're bringing up, while there's clearly a difference between these houses and if it were to be 8 people living in a home that had never dealt with addiction, I think a lot of these questions wouldn't be being asked if that wasn't a factor. So I think a lot of this is stuff that could be looked into regardless of this bill, and that shouldn't be dragging it down in a way.
Representative Frank, on your current laws, these should be these are considered disabilities, alcohol and drug.
My understanding is that under federal law, substance abuse is a protected class of disability or medical condition. So it can't be discriminated against by a town or a state that says you can't, we're going to treat you differently than anybody else who does not suffer from substance abuse. That's my understanding, and I could be wrong.
That's the way I understand it also. Now, in your community, do you have regulations, zoning regulations and planning regulations that address disability issues?
Other than ADA requirements, we do not. We do have at least one house which is for developmentally disabled people. And I don't actually know if it existed pre-zoning or if they got any kind of special exception. It's certainly something that I would be willing to investigate and report back to the subcommittee. That house happens to be about probably 3/4 of a mile from where I live. And from what I know, it causes no problems. And the same organization just opened another house in downtown Hanover. And as far as I know, it is also causing no problems. But again, I'd be very happy to investigate and report back.
Thank you, Representative Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I may start sounding like a broken record here, but this certification process that we're hinting at, and I feel like we're kind of in the process of inventing this certification process, and then asking the communities to apply it in their communities. I think would be much cleaner and less of a risk for the communities to just, in the legislation, just say that these recovery houses have to be ADA compliant, period. And then it becomes, it's just an overlay from the federal requirements. if you just live with the federal requirements, then you're compliant. And from a legislation and a regulation standpoint, but from a caring for the individual, which is a little bit of a softer science, I think we can sleep better at night that we have done the right thing for these compromised individuals. If we know that they're going to be residing in an ADA compliant facility, although that may be a little more expensive for the house owner, it's safer, and I think it's better for this client being served than otherwise.
Representative Germana.
Thank you. And just to come back to a normal, I'm sorry, I blanked.
Representative Frack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Getting back to the question of ADA compliance, and I'm drawing from testimony that we heard on some of the other bills, VA modifications, etc. I think, but I don't know for certain, that ADA requirements only apply to publicly accessible buildings, and ADA requirements specifically address physical disabilities. And I'm not sure that all people in the subset of substance abusers who are in recovery suffer from physical disabilities that would require any kind of modification. I'm just raising a question.
Okay, thank you. Representative.
Thank you. I got it back.
Good.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that a little bit too. These are also issues that could be looked into regardless of whether this bill was passed or not, looking into the certifying process and kind of everything that has to do with that process. I think if that was a concern, that would have to be done with or without this legislation.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else? We've all done with discussion, pretty much. I know. Okay, we have to make a report today. This is our last meeting before last executive session. So we have to make a recommendation to the full committee based on the statute that we're currently looking at. Whatever the recommendation is, anyone is welcome to do an amendment to this statute or to this bill if they feel it appropriate. Okay, I'll need to have some type of motion from someone. Representative Walker.
I make a motion that we refer to the full committee ITL.
I second that.
Second. Okay. And we have no amendments in our presence at this time, correct? Nobody has any amendments?
Nobody
Okay.
has amendment.
Okay. Any discussion on the ITL? You want to talk to your motion, Representative Walker? Please.
I think there's just a number of issues and we have no amendments and we're running out of time to get it to our last executive meeting. And I think we just ITL it at this time.
Thank you, Representative Germana.
Thank you. Yeah, I do oppose an ITL motion. I think that this is legislation that's really needed. And while there are some issues that I do feel will be fixed through an amendment, a lot of the issues that we've brought up today, I feel like are problems regardless this bill gets signed or not, and are problems whether it be a sober living home or whether it be 8 people who have never had addiction problem that would be going into living at home together. So I just think that a lot of these issues aren't tied specifically to this bill.
Thank you. Any other comments? Representative Frank?
I definitely agree with the sentiments of Representative Germana. There are lots of issues, and my thought is that the same issues apply to sober houses as apply to college student group homes for developmentally disabled people, as applied to short-term rentals even. And last week, I spoke with Representative Howland, who you may remember from our committee, who is now on the Housing Committee. And his suggestion was to try to get the two committees together under, I'm not quite sure what sort of an umbrella, and see if we could hash these things out over time so that the state has a more or less uniform policy on residences that are occupied by, I'm going to say, not families. And it seems to me that there would be a lot of commonalities that could be applied.
Okay.
So
does-
I would go along with ITL,
Okay.
because I think it's a problem that requires a lot more study.
Very good. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. This is on HB 432. And this vote is the recommendation from the subcommittee to the full committee based on our work session, 2 work sessions. Okay. Representative Walker,
Yes.
Representative Dolan,
Yes.
Representative Frack,
Yes.
Representative Germana,
No.
and the chair votes yes. It's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, what was the question? Are we voting ITL?
Yeah.
Okay.
You all set? Okay.
Yeah.
The vote is 4-1 to recommend ITL to the full committee. Again, feel free, Representative, for amendments if you feel appropriate. Okay. Do we have any other business to come before the committee today?
No.
Seeing none, I'll take a motion to close the subcommittee work session.
Motion to close the work session.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time to come to the subcommittee meetings. I appreciate it.